From Acapulco, Mexico, this is Anarchast.
What's up, everybody? Welcome to Anarchast, your home for anarchy on the internet. I've got a returning guest, unfortunately coming in from Australia. He was kidnapped in Mexico. That's what you hear about all the time, people getting kidnapped in Mexico. And like many of my guests on Anarchast, they get kidnapped a lot. They get put in torture camps, prison camps. He actually got flown around the world for free, actually, by the Mexican government. Really interesting and bizarre and crazy story. We're actually going to go over how crazy it is. As usual, the government, anything it's involved in is just absolutely ridiculous. So Kurt was actually here in Mexico. I think he was living in Guadalajara and having a great time. And I guess he stayed a little longer than, I guess, some bureau rats said that he could. And then he was kidnapped. And, well, Kurt, why don't you tell us the whole story? We'll start from there.
Yeah, well, I stayed, I overstayed my tourist card for about 2.5 years. So then in my head, it kind of all made sense, because the thing is, you never see immigration agents outside of the airport. And even I remember the last time I left Mexico willingly in Guadalajara airport, I waved the tourist card in the immigration agent's face, and I said, what do I do with this thing? And it's like, I don't know, give it to the airline. It doesn't, obviously didn't care too much about it. So I figured I was all right when it came to immigration. Like the rule is in Mexico, I mean, if you can break the rules, then you kind of do it, as long as it doesn't hurt anybody. That's normally what happens. And if someone pulls you up, normally you give them a tip. But in this case, that didn't really work. So I was heading back on a bus from Mexico City to Guadalajara. And it's a route I've taken so many times and never had any problems. But this time it happened at around 1 or 2 a.m. Some immigration agents got on and started asking for passports, and my heart started pumping, and and I was like, oh no, what am I gonna tell these guys? I was with my friend Gela, and she was trying to talk them out of it, and we're trying to give them a tip or something so they could leave us alone, but that didn't really work. So they ended up taking me back to the immigration center there in Mexico City, and it was pretty stressful. But I don't know how you want to. You want me to just keep telling the whole story? Or
Yeah, just keep going. It's an interesting story. So you were basically, they stopped you on a bus, and that's actually fairly normal for people who don't know. Unfortunately, here in Mexico, when you're going between states, that's usually where they will board with these sort of immigration people. And just so people know, it's pretty hilarious that in the U.S. they're so worried about immigration from Mexico, because there's actually more people leave the U.S., more Mexicans leave the U.S. every year than go to the U.S. because it's so unfree now in the U.S. But there's actually considered to be a fairly serious illegal alien immigration problem here in Mexico from foreigners. There's something like, I think it's estimated, there's over like 1 million illegal immigrants here in Mexico from the U.S. alone. And so for whatever reason, and we can get into the reasons later if we want, but they've decided, well, we better step up and start finding these people, the usual sort of BS government stuff. And they did find you on that bus. And so why don't you take it from there? What happened after that?
Yeah, well, they took me to the immigration center, and they processed me and took my belongings off me, and got me to write down whatever I had in my possession to make sure they cataloged it. And then it was about 5 a.m. That we got into the center there, and they started putting all these papers in front of me, and they're like, you sign this and sign that, and it was like, hang on, I'm not going to sign anything before I understand exactly what it is I'm signing. And it's 5 a.m. I've just been, rudely awoken from my sleep, and arrested, sent off to a detention camp there. So I don't really know what's going on, and it's giving me this stuff in Spanish, and I'm trying to decode what it's saying. And they're like, "Oh, well, what are you, a 5-year-old boy? Don't you understand? Like, you just need to sign?" And I'm like, "Well, hold on. I mean, I'm sure you wouldn't want to sign anything without reading it first, unless you're some kind of moron or something." So they got pretty agitated about that when I wouldn't sign immediately. I ended up signing one of the forms under protest, writing "firmo bajo presión," and they really didn't like that, and they got in my face asking me, "Hey, so what are you talking about? You're signing under pressure. What do you think this is?" And getting very aggressive, trying to convince me that I wasn't signing under protest. So then, they processed me, and they managed to, all through the process, I was trying to avoid answering too many questions, because I thought at that stage maybe I could, maybe I could convince them that I'd taken a trip to Guatemala or something, but and renewed my tourist card without having it with me. But then they kept asking me the questions, and I think I ended up giving away more than I should have. But then they processed me, put me in the camp, and gave me a blanket and everything. In the camp, I guess the conditions weren't so bad. I mean, the good thing was around 7 a.m. After getting a couple of hours sleep, some Punjabi fellows walked in, and one of them said, "Hey, if you feel lonely, don't worry, our room is right across the hall, so you can come and join us and talk to us whenever you want." And another Punjabi fellow came in and said, "Hey, do you need anything, a toothbrush or anything?" So I could tell right away that it wasn't going to be violent or like run by gangs or anything like that. So that was a bit of a relief. But it is kind of stressful because it's this, it's just, my brother described it like, imagine if you're taking a train to work, and then suddenly they take you off and haul you off to some camp where you're not allowed to leave. That's kind of how I felt. Like, I feel like Mexico is my home, and I just got separated from that very quickly. So actually, to be honest, it was heartbreaking. I was close to tears so many times because I just couldn't believe that that would happen. So then, they continued with the paperwork and everything. They got me to sign a bunch of things. The food in that place is, I must say, it's below par. So there's a lot of vegetarians in there because there's a lot of Indians, and they're in there eating textured vegetable protein with pasta or with rice, and that stuff, man, it's not good for you. At one stage, after eating it, I had to go to the bathroom like 5 times in a night. So that was definitely uncomfortable. And other than that, I guess it's kind of interesting to hear about all the different stories of people that are going in there. So a lot of the Indians are trying to make it to the United States through one method or another, which I find kind of funny. They're trying to, like, I asked them, so what's your plan? And some of them are trying to go to work at Google, and some of them are trying to work at 7-Eleven, and these are people from quite well-off families in India, and I have to wonder why they would want to head in that direction. And then there were a few people who are actually permanent residents of Mexico. Some of them Pakistanis, one of them was Colombian. Permanent residents for 3 years, 14 years, one of them I remember, and they just get this like red mark on their file. So when they entered Mexico City, it came up and said, "You are trying to enter the United States." And they're like, "No, I live here. I live in Mexico City. I love it here. So what are you what are you doing to me? And they detain them for a couple of weeks just based on this thought crime, basically. So that's kind of alarming. And I did meet a few US citizens as well, even one Mexican-American dual citizen, a Mexican citizen. So I had to, at some point I had to ask the immigration agents, what do you think? Like, you realize they're locking up Mexicans here. I mean, how long do you think it's going to be before they lock up one of your cousins or one of your nephews? Aren't you worried about that? And it seems they're not really worried, or they just go along with what the machine says. And so that's rather concerning.
Yeah, well, it's, you just brought up all the people in there. None of them hurt anyone. So this is typical government stuff. They're kidnapping, they're coercing you to make you sign things. They're putting you into places with really rotten food, really not good accommodations at all. And you don't want to be there in the first place. You've basically been kidnapped. This is so typical government, right? Yeah. Like, I was trying to think, how many Mexicans do you think were really angry that you were in Mexico the last few years spending all your money? I can't imagine there was even one. That would even say, yeah, we should definitely kidnap him, put him into a camp for a while, and then spend the money to send you back home. That was the shocking part, because the whole point of a lot of this appears to be like, well, you're only supposed to stay so long. You're supposed to be a tourist. If you're staying longer than that, I don't even know what. There's actually no logical reason for them to be actually kicking like Australians out of Mexico. There's no welfare system here in Mexico. There's no free medical care. There's so they don't have any of those sort of things. So there's literally, unless you've hurt someone, and you didn't, and no one in there seems to have done that, there's really no reason to do this. But that is so typically government, isn't it? To spend all this money, like how much did it cost to get all those guys to go on that bus every night, to spend all that time shaking you down, to feed you crappy food, but that still costs money. They still have to pay for whatever that is. And then they spent, like, I don't even know what a ticket to Australia from Mexico is, but I bet it's a few $1,000s to get you out from spending money in Mexico and actually improving the economy here. It's crazy.
Yeah. So to get a ticket from Mexico to Australia, I mean, if I book 3 months in advance, it's normally about $1,500, $1,200, $1,500. If they're booking it a week in advance, which is what they were doing, it probably $2,000, maybe $3,000. And they had to book 3 of them because the airlines demand that 2 agents went with me, which actually at the time when they told me... 2
guys had to fly all the way to Australia?
Yep, and they stayed in Sydney.
They had to fly all the way to Australia with you, just sit beside you.
Yep, that's right, yeah. And it's not like I was in handcuffs or anything. We were having a beer together, and so it's not like, it's not like I was at any threat or anything. So it's just it's another waste.
So the total cost of this was like. So the total cost has to be at least $10,000, and that's a really low estimate when you 3 plane tickets, everything else I just mentioned, all the people working, all that kind of stuff. $10,000 to do this. Like, what Mexican would be in support of this? They're just wasting all their money. And actually, like I said, anyone who's here is probably improving the economy. They're probably spending money. Even those Indian guys are probably bringing money over from India, and for whatever reason, spending in hotels or restaurants or whatever. It's exactly, in a free market, this would never, ever, ever happen. But that's the case with government. That's why it's so nuts. And, it's the same in every country. I'd say the same about the U.S. or anywhere. But in Mexico, with a place without even any government support systems or anything, which is great. That's why I like Mexico. To do this is the height of insanity.
Yes, that's right. Yeah, they're just spending this money. And even with when they told me that they would take 2 agents to go along with me, I thought, okay, so someone's getting this junket, like they're getting this beautiful free trip. They'll stay there for a few days. But no, it's not even that. They stay there. They stayed in Sydney for about 24 hours. So it's not like they get a nice, good holiday out of it, which is even worse from my perspective. At least if someone gets paid off and gets to enjoy it, that makes some kind of sense. But no, they don't even get to enjoy it.
You couldn't pay me enough money to take that job. Just taking one flight to Australia every couple of years is enough for me. Imagine doing that all the time. And just imagine all the way. And actually, Larkin Rose actually had a great Facebook comment just recently talking about, we don't even know all the lost art, all the lost inventions, all of the things that have been lost because of the wastage of government over the centuries. And this is another example. Like, who knows what those two guys who were on that plane with you could have been doing in the productive free market? They might have been maybe coming up with some sort of solution for something. They would have been improving the world, or at least being productive instead of being anti-productive and actually just destroying that money, essentially, like basically wasting that money, having that stolen from people and then wasted. You know, it just goes to show. And it's just so amazing here on this show, which is Anarchast, where we have anarchists on, also known as voluntarists. We don't like people to do anything violent to coerce other people. I know it really sounds dangerous to a lot of people, but so many of our guests end up kidnapped and in camps and in tortured. Adam Kokesh was in what do they call it, isolation or whatever, which, you know, that's actually like really torture for like a week, especially for Adam. He needs to talk to people. He's a talker. And you know, it's just insane. Like, we got this show where everyone's like, oh, these anarchists are so dangerous. So we're like, yeah, we just keep getting kidnapped. We're trying to point out you guys are wasting all your money. You're being impoverished by this very system that you support. It's ruining everyone's lives. We're just trying to point this out, aren't we?
Yeah, that's right. I wasn't, like you said, I wasn't hurting anybody in Mexico. I was spending my foreign sourced income. So by all means, I should be happy about that. And most of my friends were happy that I was in Mexico, and they were sad when I had to leave and kind of distraught. But there you go. That's the craziness of it all. And I do remember I asked one of the agents that traveled with me. I said to him, this is very crazy. Like, there's all these Guatemalans and Hondurans and El Salvadorians that come into the immigration center every couple of days. And then, all these people want to do is just improve their lives a little bit, work hard, try to build something and maybe send some money back to their family. And they're putting themselves at risk. And this isn't something that should be punished, because these people are ambitious. They have a dream, which is more than what most people do. So, and they're willing to act on it. So that is not something that should be punished. That is something that should be cherished, because that is actually the finest part of the human experience, the willingness to dream, imagine a better life, and act on it, even if you don't know what's going to happen, putting yourself at risk, like a lot of Mexicans do walking through the desert. They don't know if they're necessarily going to come out the other side, but they do it because they have that dream, and that is definitely admirable.
Oh yeah, they're sometimes the best of the best sort of people, the people who do this. They're so willing to work so hard just to improve their lives, just to go somewhere and provide value for other people. Hardly any of these people have a big plan where they're going to get there and just start robbing people. That's very, very, very rarely the case, if ever the case. And of course, the U.S. is so funny to look at right now because, of course, hundreds of years ago, that was the place to go. The rest of Europe was so run over with governments and royalty and all this horrible, horrible stuff that people were like, they found a new continent. There isn't much government there yet. Let's go. They're like accepting anyone. They're like, bring your tire, bring your whatever, anything. Just go. And the people who actually went, and a lot of people died on the way. It was not easy. It wasn't like you just hopped on a plane back then. You got on a ship, and then if you're going to go to California, you'd be like spending like 6 years traversing and getting shot at by Indians sometimes and whatever. But you'd be it wouldn't be easy at all. And that's for many reasons why a lot of people, and even a lot of Americans will still say to this day, that's really what made America, was because all the hardest core people, the people who really were willing to take risks and really willing to work hard, all went there all at once. And that's really what happened. And that's all they're basically doing now, is trying to stop those people. And isn't that so sad and so funny at the same time, but so sad that you have in the U.S. now where they're talking about building a wall because that's just the sad state of affairs, that they've been so lost. These people have no idea. They don't even know what freedom is anymore. They got the biggest prison population in the world, in the U.S. A lot of them for the same things as you were basically kidnapped for, just people trying to get along, get a job and stuff like that.
Yeah.
And now they have all this socialist stuff. They have communist-style central planning of the economy with the Federal Reserve for the last 100 years, so that's impoverishing everyone. Then they have this very socialist government instituting things like minimum wage laws, which destroy the economy. So they're destroying the economy with communism, socialism, and it's getting so bad. And then they have fascism on top of it with this giant police state, and they're just like forcing everyone to do it. It's just turned into hell on earth, the U.S. And because of that, they're like, well, the problem is foreigners. We better keep them out. It's like, no one wants to go there much anymore. Like maybe a few people, maybe there's a few Indian guys, maybe a few guys from Guatemala, I don't know, but most people don't want to go there anymore. And now they're like, we got to build a wall. And what happens with walls? Well, that usually ends up keeping people in. It was East Germany where they built that wall, and they didn't say they were building the wall to keep East Germans in. Of course they didn't. They said this is to protect the country because the West Germans and the U.S. are ruining East Germany. Well, you see how that all worked out, and that's exactly what the U.S. is doing today. And it's just so sad and just crazy for us to look at it, from our perspective, isn't it?
Yes, that's right. Well, I've gone into a few arguments on Facebook about that, when I make that comparison between the Berlin Wall and the Trump Wall, and people say, no, but the Berlin Wall was meant to keep people in, and I'm like, real, what do you think is going on here? But they already have the wall there. I mean, they have the Clinton Wall. It's funny that Trump Wall is much more publicized, but they have the Clinton Wall. It covers most of the border there, and forces people to go through the desert if they want to cross. So it's not like they don't already have that protection, or protection in inverted commas, that they have. They do have that, and it's not really going to help because, yeah, they say make America great again. The thing that made it great was immigrants coming to work hard, like you said.
Yeah, absolutely. So you're back in Australia now. Why don't you just tell us what it's like to be back? You've been away for a few years. Just give us first impressions on being back in Australia.
Right. Yeah, it is a little weird to be back here. So I guess when I left, I started to notice in Melbourne, over the years I lived there, over about 6 years, it started to become more of a police state, to the point where I noticed there would be like 12 police officers on a corner on Elizabeth Street, and I didn't know why. And yeah, there are definitely a few things that when I talk to people, it is like a little bit of the twilight zone. So for example, when I got into Sydney, I was like about to cross the road, and then I was like, hang on, nobody here is crossing, even though there are no cars on this road. What's going on? I asked my brother about it later, and he said, well, I mean, there are some crazy motorists out there, but one of the main things is in the CBD, they actually fine people for jaywalking. And I was like, what? So they fine people for, just for crossing the road, basically. I mean, jaywalking should be about if you're actually doing something stupid on the road, like just walking straight down the road, or like running around in circles on the road, but they do it just for crossing against a red light. Well, that's so all the people in Sydney are like these little drones who have to follow the red lights. That's a subtle thing, but it's still a little weird after coming from Mexico, where people are just like, yeah, well, I'll just cross. I can see nobody's coming. So it does mean, in a subtle way, that people are disconnected from what they're looking at in front of them. Just follow the signals and you'll be okay. So, and then a friend of mine is working through the process of adoption, and she said to me a lot that it's not about, well, she said that they're replacing responsibility with accountability. So instead of ensuring that somebody is responsible and a good person and all these kind of things, what they do is check a lot of boxes. So they go and give her inspections once a month and check if the coffee table is clean, or I don't know what they check, but it's like this little way that Big Brother gets into your home to look at the way you're doing things. And she pointed out to me, well, I guess in Mexico, if people are living in poverty, I mean, what we call poverty, like if people have dirt floors or getting access to clean water is hard, then that's just what's accepted. That's just a part of life for many people around the world. But here in Australia, if somebody were living in conditions, even conditions much better than that, they would have their children taken from them. And so that's what happens a lot of the time. So that's very unusual to think about. So those are a couple of things that stuck out in my mind.
Yeah, it's always hard for me to get used to, after being in Mexico for a while, to go to a place like the U.S. I even said that when I was in Las Vegas. I was like, it's so weird how everyone just stops and waits for the light to change. And it's like there's no cars. Like, it just seems like so strange. Like they're just like robots. It's just not it doesn't feel natural. So you're in Australia now, and kind of a funny story about this is like they paid to fly you back, which is unbelievable. And you were actually telling me there was actually a Venezuelan guy in there with you, and he actually turned himself in because he wanted the free flight back home. So this is like your typical government, just unbelievable stuff. So if you're from Australia and you want to go to Mexico but you can only afford one way, don't worry about it. Just stay longer than 6 months and then just turn yourself in. You got to eat some crappy food for a few days, and then they'll fly you back with 2 buddies. So what are they telling you about coming back? Because I know you had a place in Guadalajara. You had your whole life there, really. Are you planning on coming back, or can you come back, or what's the status of that?
Yeah, that's right. So they sent me off with just the luggage that I had on me. So it was a bit weird because I just been to the hot springs and I only had warm clothes, and they sent me back to Australia in the middle of winter. So I had to deal with that. Wear a couple of t-shirts. But what they're telling me is I'm banned officially from Mexico for 2 years. But if I speak to the embassy, that maybe they'll be lenient. So I don't know if the guy in the immigration center was just telling me that, so I'd sign the paper and stop asking questions. But that looks like maybe after 6 months I can get back into Mexico. So I'm going to use this time to travel a little bit around Australia. There's a nice place I've never been. People say it's the best place in Australia, the friendliest place, which is Byron Bay. So I'd like to check that out. And an old school friend of mine actually has an intentional community, like I guess an anarcho-communist community, north of Byron Bay, like 9 hours from here, I guess. So that's something I'd like to check out and see how they structure their society in this horizontal way, and interview them and see what works. So that should be cool. And then I'll probably take a trip through Asia and go to Thailand, India, Bangladesh, and Indonesia for a little while.
That sounds cool. So you're not allowed, at least for 6 months, into Mexico, theoretically, although you could just fly to the U.S. and walk across the border. They don't even check on Friday and Saturday nights. But if you did want to follow their stupid laws. So that's good. So in 6 months, it'll still be before Anarchapulco. You actually performed at the last 2 Anarchapulcos, so it'd be sad if you can't make it this year because you're not allowed by the Mexican government. It's just, it's just government always, like always. That's all our problems. It's always government, everyone. Yeah. Like, just look at everything. It's like people complain. It's like, oh, the traffic's bad. Well, those are the government roads. Yeah. It's like, oh, I have no money. Well, who took it all? The government, the taxation. It's like, oh, man, there's a lot of crime. Yeah, that's all caused because everyone's so poor from the government and the taxation and the Federal Reserve and the central bank printing up so much money. And then they create a welfare state, which really destroys people. And then they don't know how to do anything. And then they just start robbing people. It's all caused by the government. It's like everything. Like, people make fun of us anarchists. They're like, you guys think everything's like, all the problems in the world are caused by government. It's like 95% are caused by government. The other 5%, I don't know, but like, governments and central banks, that's pretty much most of it. We can just get rid of that. So hopefully you can make it back to Mexico for Anarchapulco. If not, we'll pour some tequila on the whatever they do in the rap videos for you.
Yeah. Well, what you're saying there. I mean, it's I think about it sometimes. Like, there's so many beautiful places around the world. Like Australia is so amazing. Mexico is so amazing. The cenotes, the mountains, the fresh water, hot springs, all this stuff. Venezuela, little hidden beaches, and all this crazy stuff. But all of these countries are ruined to some extent by bad government policy. So which is the majority. So that's the sad, tragic thing about it. But yeah, I'll see if I can make it to Anarchapulco next year and have some fresh tracks and perform and rock the stage like I did this year. So.
That's great. And for people out there, we haven't announced it yet, but it will be announced in the next few days. And this time I'm serious. It'll be, that dates are actually finalized. It's February 15th to 18th. We'll be announcing in the next few days, no more than a week or two. It'll be all fully announced, everything. It's been a number of delays. It's huge. It's going to be massive next year. So there's so much involved in it. Every year after Anarchapulco, we're usually so excited. We're like, whoa, that was so amazing. And we're like, we should get ready and start planning and like actually launch and like announce the next Anarchapulco like next week. And we always go, yeah, let's do it. And it's always like this. It's like always July. And we're like, we still haven't done it yet. It's like, man, there's so much to plan and all this sort of stuff, but we're getting around to it. So if there's anything else you want to mention, Kurt, while we got you, just feel free. And if not, why don't you let people know where they can find you? Are you still doing the Paradise Paradox from there in Australia? And anything else you want to let people know?
Yeah, still doing the Paradise Paradox. So I had a bit of a slow down because I need to sort out some video editing equipment. But I've got some interviews with Gello on the backlog, so that should be good. Talking about manifesting your reality and adventuring around the world and not caring so much about money, I guess. So those are in the pipeline. So yeah, you check out the Paradise Paradox on Facebook and on YouTube and theparadiseparadox.com. Follow us on Steemit, Paradise-Paradox, and I'm Churdzu, CHURDTZU on Steemit as well. So that's all the good stuff.
Yeah, check it out. I really like your show. If you haven't seen it, Paradise Paradox, really interesting. Always has really interesting guests on talking about, quite interesting topics that don't always get talked about. So definitely check it out on Paradise Paradox. We'll have the links to those all down below. And if you like this video, please like, subscribe, share, send this around, let people know about it. Don't be shy. That's how we can spread this information, is just hit that little like, that little thumb in the little bottom there. You're sitting there, you're like, how can I help spread anarchy? It's right there. Just hit like, hit share, hit subscribe. That's it. That's all you got to do. We don't have to go and fight and chop people's heads off anymore. We live in the technological digital age. You just hit like, and that can actually change the world. You can actually help get the video out there more, and people go, oh, I didn't know anarchy was like that. And before you know it, we got anarchy on earth and peace and prosperity like we've never known it. So that's it for Anarchast, your home for anarchy on the internet. Peace, love, and anarchy.
From Acapulco, Mexico, this is Anarchast.